The Vedas are considered to be eternal, and according to Hindu tradition, they were not created by any single person. However, the sage Veda Vyasa is credited with compiling the Vedas into 4 distinct texts: the Rig Veda, Yajur Veda, Samaveda, and Atharva Veda. Why did Vyasa undertake the task of compiling the Vedas? According to Srimad Bhagavatam, Vyasa was inspired by the Supreme Being to compile the Vedas into a form that would be easily accessible to people in the future. Since he knew that people in the coming ages would have shorter lifespans, less inclination towards spiritual pursuits, and a weaker memory, he realized that the Vedas, which were previously passed down through oral tradition, would become fragmented and distorted over time, and that a written version was needed to preserve their essence. First, he compiled the Vedas into 4 distinct texts: the Rig Veda, Yajur Veda, Samaveda, and Atharva Veda. Then he divided each Veda into 4 parts: Samhita, Brahmana, Aranyaka, and Upanishad. Samhita contained the hymns, mantras, and prayers. Brahmana contained the rituals and sacrifices that were performed during Vedic times. Aranyaka contained the esoteric teachings for ascetics who lived in forests, and Upanishad contained the philosophical and spiritual teachings of the Vedas. After compiling the Vedas, Vyasa realized that the spiritual and philosophical teachings contained within them needed to be made accessible to even a common man. The Vedas were highly complex and were initially meant for those who were trained in the rituals and practices that were prescribed in these texts. He recognized that the teachings of the Vedas were relevant to all, and he wanted to make them accessible to everyone. It is then he wrote the Mahabharata, Bhagavad Gita, and the Bhagavatam. Since he recognized that the complex rituals and practices of the Vedas were not accessible to everyone, and that there was a need for texts that were more accessible and practical. When Vyasa produced such a voluminous amount of work, question arises: how many years did he live and how did he produce this amount of work? Though the exact duration of his life is uncertain since it is not documented and varies depending on the source, Vyasa was believed to have lived for several hundred years. Some sources state that he lived for more than 500 years, while others suggest that he lived for over 1,000 years. Through different epochs and witnessed several significant events in Indian history. So how could he have produced this amount of work? Apart from divine vision, Vyasa's prolific output was his dedication and commitment to his work. He is said to have spent long periods of time in deep meditation and contemplation, which helped him to access the wisdom and knowledge that he needed to produce his works. His work ensured that the knowledge contained within these texts would be preserved and accessible to future generations. And it continues to inspire and guide people on the path of spiritual growth and liberation.